Perfect Pitch. I'm your host, Nicole Rodriguez, also the CEO and founder of NRPR Group. And on this show, for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek into what you're going to get. On our show, I interview some of the most influential members of the media, and we discuss how they got into journalism, some best practices for how to work with them, and we give them the opportunity to share stories about how they got into their respective roles and what makes a great story for them. Today, I am joined by someone that I consider one of my closest friends in the media and someone whose company I enjoy during CES when we are usually in person. And we'll get into that. But my floor walking buddy at CES, none other than Dean Takahashi, who is the lead writer for GamesBeat at VentureBeat. He is a tech journalist titan, in my opinion, for more than 28 years and has covered games for more than 21 years. He's been at VentureBeat since 2008. Before that, he was at San Jose Mercury News, The Red Herring, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, and he's also authored 2 books, Opening the Xbox and the Xbox 360 Uncloaked. So, and for those of you who are big on games, you probably know about GamesBeat. Well, Dean is the brains behind a lot of that. He's also the GamesBeat Decides podcast host. So without further ado, I welcome Dean Takahashi to Perfect Pitch. Dean, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind introduction.
Of course. I'm just glad to have you here. So Dean, you and I have been friends for a long time, and I sincerely enjoy just the time we've gotten to spend getting to know each other. I love the fact that when we're walking around at CES, usually not during a pandemic, just your insights. You have been able to see behind the curtain of a lot of technology companies, right? So a lot of what you focus on is games. But what I also love is that if there's something that's game changing, innovative, or sometimes just plain weird, right? That I've read a lot of those stories from you, and I really enjoy them. So how did your love for either writing or technology, which one came first and which one led you to journalism?
Well, let's see. My life story here. No.
Yeah. From the beginning.
I started reading a lot in like middle school because I was a shy kid, and I got into things like the Lord of the Rings and science fiction and Dune, and I developed writing along with that reading habit, and yet I was this quiet Asian American kid who faced the usual pressures to go into things like business or engineering or science, and so I tried those, and I kind of tried them as much as I could, and wasn't all of that. There's nothing special about my abilities in those areas. And even through college, I kind of fought that. But I did grow up in the days when, things like Watergate happened, and, I could be inspired by all the President's Men. And there, seemed like a great mission to go along with journalism as a career. And so at Berkeley, I studied, a variety of things, but then I really enjoyed the classes. I felt more at home. I felt like I found my voice in classes like journalism and English literature, and even sort of things like science fiction, right? So I got a summer job at Berkeley that was helping other minority journalists train and then get work in the industry. It was like an affirmative action program that Berkeley ran in partnership with the Institute for Journalism Education, which was started by Robert Maynard, who was the head of the Oakland Tribune. And the idea was to get more minority journalists into communities where they could, cover the communities better, because they came from those places, right? And so, like at the time, I think the Kerner Commission report had figured out that 6%, like less than 6% of the journalists in the nation were people of color, and that with 20% plus of the population being people of color, then it just wasn't a good match for like anything like education, democracy, anything like that. And so there was this interesting mission that they were on, and I bought into it. I did that summer job for 3 summers in a row, and wound up graduating as an English major. I went and got a master's degree in journalism at Northwestern. Still fairly quiet guy, so I didn't go into broadcast, but I did then decide to go into writing and journalism as a reporter. I got my first job out of Northwestern at the Dallas Times Herald through people that I had met in the Berkeley program, and so then quickly figured out that I wasn't into crime reporting, because that was not that was not my thing. But they did stick me into the middle of the business section in Dallas, and there were interesting things that were happening in the city there. Like companies like Texas Instruments had been around for decades. And so I got to cover them. I covered the defense industry, the airline industry, and tech is sort of what stuck. One of my bosses moved over to the LA Times in Orange County, and I went along eventually. I stopped at the Orange County Register for a little bit, but got to the LA Times in Orange County, when they still had like almost 180 people covering Orange County. Today, the LA Times, I think, has something like 0 people covering Orange County, because that's like a journalism war that they gave up on. But at the time it was good, and so I got to cover what was there in Orange County, and there were fledgling game companies there. Like a guy named Brian Fargo had started a company called Interplay, and it had been making games like the Lord of the Rings games that I enjoyed. And then there was a small company called Chaos Studios. I remembered, and I wrote about them when they got acquired by Davidson for $7 million. And it was like a big deal for them, like they're like these guys in their 20s, and their company got acquired, and so that was like a big story at the time, right? And they turned out to become Blizzard Entertainment, and now they're a part of Activision Blizzard with 10,000 plus employees and a market cap of $75 billion, right?
Wow.
So that's part of what's fun for me, is that like I wrote the very first story on these guys at Blizzard, and I still cover them today. And sort of covering companies over that long cycle, that long term, from cradle to the end, to the exit, to the grave sometimes, and so I enjoy that. That's what this career has been like.
I love it. I love it. And I didn't realize your history with Blizzard. I believe Blizzard is one of the sort of corporate companies that have a partnership with Heal. And I know that you've covered Heal since I started working with them, and now stepping down, having the CEO literally ask for you by name and saying, I'm only talking to a handful of people, and I want Dean to be one of them. And I'm like, absolutely. So that just shows how much, respect that people have for you and for your craft and the things that you've done and the dedication there. But that's a really interesting bit of history. And I love it. I think this is the first time I've heard the whole sort of story here. So that's great. And then, you've been with VentureBeat for such a long time. You're like a staple there, right? And I'm sure
13 years now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. And as you've even been at VentureBeat, there has been so much, that's changed in the both gaming, the media, sort of industry in general. What are some things that you're seeing that you're really excited about that VentureBeat is getting into, and just keeping your love for your role so exciting after all this time?
But I have enjoyed change over time, and I did get to places like, say, the San Jose Mercury News in 1994, when the same year that Netscape went public. And it was a very sort of heady time for Silicon Valley, right? And got to see the emergence of companies like, say, Amazon and Google. And it was just a fascinating time to be in a place that was sort of changing the world like that. I do remember at that time writing the very first story about NVIDIA, and now they're another 10,000 person company that's also, say, the most valuable chip company, in the U.S. for sure, and I'm not sure about the world, but yeah. So it was uh, good to cover tech inside sort of the capital of tech. And then at the same time, I made a shift to Wall Street Journal, and they didn't have anybody covering video games. There were some big video game companies in the territory, like Electronic Arts, Sega, Nintendo, and they asked me to cover that because I was also the only one who played video games on staff. And that was that's how old I am, because like everybody plays video games now, right?
I was gonna say, yeah, wow, that's awesome.
But that was really interesting, because then I sort of learned that, like, in order to cover something well, you should like really immerse yourself into it as much as you can. Like, I would try to fix computers and maybe understand something about chips, but by playing video games and appreciating them, appreciating them for like a form of art. I think I became much better at being able to cover those companies, and so now it's been 24 years or so since I've been covering games, and yeah, I think it's it's that's one thing about being able to sort of last this long in a business. I think that's important, which is you have to be really passionate about what you do and what you like. And then the other is just specializing in something that is the right thing to specialize in. So both tech and games came things that survived my industry, right? I was in the newspaper industry, and it's pretty much gone.
Yeah.
But the fact that I specialized in the right things, I think, made it so that I could last longer and sort of make this leap. You mentioned the big changes that happened in industry. Like 13 years ago, I got an invitation from my now boss, Matt Marshall, who was the venture capital writer at the San Jose Mercury News. He left on his own to start a blog that he called VentureBeat, to really cover the venture capital industry. And he had done that for 2 years. He made enough money doing that to hire people, and I was like the fifth person to join VentureBeat. And I didn't expect at that time to really do much beyond covering startups and venture capital. But it turned out that that was around the same time then that things like Facebook were getting off the ground, and Facebook games became a big thing. And then all of a sudden, all this venture capital money went into companies like Zynga. And so games became a very big thing again about what I covered at VentureBeat. And since then we've expanded, like our view of what we can cover to a lot of tech. We focus now more on enterprise tech and games, and I organize events as well.
Dean, I think that's really fascinating. I actually didn't know that you were the fifth hire over at VentureBeat. Like that's really incredible. So when I say staple, I didn't even, I mean, you really, really are. And I love how GamesBeat has evolved. And the beauty is you've taken your passion for something that you really love. Like you said, you've immersed yourself in it to understand it, to love it, to be able to tinker with games, consoles, you name it, see the evolution and be able to thoughtfully put together stories. And not just like that, but like volumes. You put out volumes of stories weekly, and that's not easy, right? So I totally tip my hat off to you. You're a beast when it comes to, just churning out not just stories, but good quality pieces. And and I think that just speaks to your passion, with journalism and things. And so getting into, obviously how we met. I'm in PR, you're a writer, and I want to say it was early 2008, or even it might have been before then. I think it might have been one of the first times I had started reading your stuff was back when you were at the San Jose Mercury News. And I just remember you were interviewing, I want to say it was Philip Alvelda or something with like Moby TV or something like that. And I just thought, he's so nice. And I remembered reading a bunch of your stories, and I thought, God, he's so smart. Like, okay, you know what? I'm going to keep up on what he's doing. And hopefully if there's ever anything else, then I'm going to reach out to him again. And over the years, we've had so many great opportunities to work together, and I'm very thankful for that. But also just thankful for the friendship that we've been able to create. With working with PR people, I personally see my job as serving the media just as much, if not more, than the clients, only because if the media get what they want, then of course by a natural whatever, by universal law, like the client gets ultimately what they want, which is, well, hey, I just want my name and VentureBeat kind of thing. But I'm not going to take them to VentureBeat if they're not ready, right? Or I'm going to try if I feel like they're close, and I'm going to take a no if you say that it's a no. Like, okay, you know what, Dean says it's a no, and if it's a no from Dean, we're going to wait until you're ready kind of thing. What's it like majority of the time working with PR people, and, both pros and cons that you would share?
Yeah. Well, the newspaper business was so different than the blogging or the tech news website business is today, where I used to write maybe 3 stories a week at the Mercury News, and I'd write maybe 2 stories a month at the Red Herring magazine. But now, it's not unusual to write 10 stories in a day sometimes, and so much stuff comes at you that you feel like you're trying to juggle so much, or you have like 10 hands
dodging bullets all day, like whoa.
Yeah, and you want to catch the important things, and then just be able to say, okay, that's enough, and you let go of the things that you just can't get to. So that's what it feels like. I think close to maybe 18,000 stories or something in 10 years. And it's sort of, that's the right ballpark. I don't know exactly, but and so like there were times when I could say write a book or the beginnings of a book in the evening, right? But there's just no time for something like that anymore. There's more video involved, right? Participating in podcasts. My colleague Jeff actually hosts the GamesBeat Decides podcast, Jeff Grubb, but I joined that every now and then. And so there's a lot of variety to what you do, and I try to get out more, try to meet a lot of people. When you get good pitches that come in from seasoned people like you, then you pay more attention. And so I appreciate it when you put thought into the kind of pitch that is more ready. But I do get pitches, 500 emails every day or so that I would have to go through to find out, some much smaller number of pitches there. But I still have to try to screen through everything like that, and it's tough. So it's like finding finding what the needles in the haystack that turn into good stories.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Now, do you have any, I don't know, like best practices for organizing your inbox, or finding, like having some of those golden nuggets even pop up for you? I know at NRPR, for me, for my own sanity, I do this like inbox zero thing where even if I don't open it, like if I look at the subject line, I know either who it's from, or if I do or don't like the subject line, I'm either going to delete it, file it, open it, whatever. But as close to I can, zero as I can at the end of the day, I try to just delete or organize so that I can keep what's right in my inbox and then work through that. I can only imagine what it is you are sifting through on a daily basis. Like when you're looking at your inbox, do you have a specific, like, okay, Nicole, this is how I know what to delete, and this is how I know I've gotten a good pitch? Like, what is it that you do for yourself personally?
Yeah, I don't do too much of that. I try to go through things. I do skip the things I know I can skip, and sometimes I come back to them later. And then I do some regular things like our search for the word embargo, because inevitably there'll be a bunch of embargo pitches that I will miss. And so just to make sure I haven't missed anything, our search on that. I do have important tags that I tag on people that I know well or have heard from a lot before. So you'll get an important tag. So then I see these things pop.
VIP club. I'm honored. I love
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Okay.
And then, but yeah, the rest is very hard to get through. So there is no good solution for to fish through
The email
500,
flood.
500 emails a day.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, and I can only imagine. I know that, with emails, so many people are trying different things to like get off of email, but so much work gets done in emails that it's I don't know if the next big thing is going to be where, we all can telepathically just tell each other what we need, and we can sift through that. Like, Dean, I have a story for you, tell you through telepathy.
I mean,
But yeah.
I stay active on things like LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, and people try to reach me those ways as well. Like sometimes they tweet at me, "Hey, I sent you an email pitch," and I go like, "Oh, I must have missed."
Yeah,
So
in the 500 that just came
yeah,
through.
it is a little like it's not the way I want to get pitches, but people pitch that way just because they find that I'm paying attention, right? So.
Do they actually send a full pitch in either a tweet DM or
Like
LinkedIn?
a
Do they?
Facebook message, like a, messenger message or something. So yeah.
Got it. But well, for the record, for any of you guys listening, Dean prefers that you pitch in his inbox. And if it's a really good pitch and you keep sending him really good pitches, you might make it to that VIP list. So that
Yeah. But yeah, I also would encourage people like to come back to me with another email to remind me of a pitch that I forgot to answer or something, right? So
Sure.
yeah, that's just more like reality. And so I think what that means is like, as even though we can publish on the hour or we can publish daily, I think approaching us early with stories is really important.
Key, absolutely. And this is something too that I feel like in the PR industry, we as leaders or people who are also guiding our clients, we need to remind our clients that journalists are humans. They're not bots. They don't work 24 hours as much as you want them to. That if you are going to announce something really big and you want that news to go out tomorrow, unless you're Microsoft and you have journalists basically who cover you as a beat, right? Whose responsibility is to cover you as Microsoft. It's just not the thing, especially if you're a startup. And that's a big thing that I try to do with guiding my clients. Like, please, you've got to give me time because you've got to give the journalist time. You've got to allow them to fit it into their very busy schedule, and also allow them a couple days to even find the email. They might not see it for 2 or 3 days. And we've got to do like the friendly, like, bump or, hey, Dean, sorry to be a pest kind of thing, but this one is like, you've covered these guys a couple of times. I want to make sure that they've just raised some money. So it takes time, and we need to be thoughtful about the fact that you already have a heavy load, to deal with. So time is a big thing. Do you prefer embargoes and exclusives over just a general pitch? And are there any specific rules or best practices that you would say that you want people to follow for either of those?
Yeah. I used to have a whole like list of 20 questions that I would send out to people and say, answer these please, and we'll find out if we can do a story or not.
Yeah.
And I felt like that, that got to be a very burdensome thing for a lot of people, even, even junior PR people, to ask all these questions of them is, more work than they should be doing in a pitch. I mean, the questionnaire would make it easier for me to write the story. I do want to have an actual press release because that for me is the last line of defense for things like spelling and things that you could trip up on or make errors on. If you have something to compare it to, compared to what you heard and recorded in an interview, then it's a good way to check your facts, right? And so a lot of PR folks that are sort of in a more modern era, I think, they send me like a blog post, which it's okay. It's not a press release, but still. And sometimes they just send me a slide deck and say, here was what we talked about. And I'm going like, okay.
So I'm supposed to sift through this and find.
Sometimes they don't even send that too. Don't make it that hard on the journalist to really understand the facts, right? Just put those facts at our disposal. We like exclusives. The more important, the better. And then it becomes like a scale of importance. Like if are we getting the story at the same time as everybody else? Are we getting it behind somebody else that's more important, like New York Times or something? Are we getting it ahead of other companies? And so the pitch becomes more important. The more we can be the ones to tell the story the best and first. And sometimes we will wait beyond an embargo time if we're waiting for better information to come along that we've asked for but hasn't arrived yet. And so in that sense, telling the best story sometimes is more important than telling the story first, right? And we will
like that. I feel like I want to pull that out in the quotes when we promote your interview, that's one of like nugget that stands out. And for more, you need to listen to the whole episode. But that makes so much sense, right? Telling the best story is sometimes better than telling it first.
I mean, if you can do both, if you do both, that's great.
Totally.
You tell it first and you tell it the best. That's good. But also stories are not necessarily preconceived all the time the way that some people think about them. Like say, the best example I like to bring up is I went to an Intel game developer event and started talking to the different independent game developers that are there. And I was talking to a woman about her game, and she was showing it off and telling me all the details about it. And it was one of many games that I saw there, one of many games I would see at in a given month. Like it wouldn't stand out. But then she mentioned, that her mother was a game developer. And then I thought about that, and I said, I don't know that many people whose parents were game developers because it's a new industry, like 50 years old at the most now, and only 20% of the women or 20% of the people in the industry are women, right? And so she's even more rare in that her mother was a game developer in the early days of the game industry. And so I asked her about that, and she said her mother worked at Electronic Arts, and she grew up playing games and tabletop games, and then she became a game developer herself. And I said, that is your story. That's an amazing story that makes you like one of a kind person that stands out among all the other people I've met at this conference. So if you can pull these things out of people that they don't know our stories, like it's a diversity story. It's like a story about that person's particular truth, and nobody else has that kind of experience. And so I love it when you can stumble upon things like that. That's one of the reasons I try to go out into the world and find stories that aren't always pitched at me as well. So I go to conferences. I used to travel a lot, right? Don't travel anymore because of the pandemic. I don't know how, like, I've still been able to do my job, but I still don't know how much traveling I would still want to do in order to find those kinds of stories again.
Yeah, and I mean, these are all such great points, and I'm curious whether or not you've dabbled in Clubhouse, because I feel like since the pandemic and since this has happened, I feel like my networking, something that I would normally do at a trade show, I'd sit and I'd listen to a panel or whatever. I would learn so much at trade shows. I feel like I'm getting a little bit of that through Clubhouse, sitting in and just hearing these open discussions, people talking about what's next in NFTs and all of these other, industries. Is that something that you're doing now as well? Going onto Clubhouse and
I joined Clubhouse only on January 26th, but then I've done this very deep dive into that rabbit hole and found, there's very interesting people to talk to and to hear from in Clubhouse. And it also is, makes the world a less lonely place when you hear the voices of other people, right?
Absolutely.
You haven't been able to go out, haven't been able to go, hear people talk at conferences and hear lots of active Q&A between people. And, if you get out on stage, you have the opportunity to ask a bunch of people like, okay, what do you think of a particular topic, right? And, I heard one executive in the game industry who had switched over to blockchain and NFTs talk about how big an experience or opportunity he felt these new things were compared to when he was starting a mobile game business, right? And he thought the opportunity was bigger. And mobile gaming is a $120 billion business now. And so when you hear that, it's like it's great intelligence for what some trends are, or what stories are going to be. And so Clubhouse has been really helpful that way. I think other people have the same experience listening to things on Discord, right? But a lot of that is a little bit more oriented into playing games with your friends and talking with them at the same time. So it's very different kind of thing. But yeah, Clubhouse is sort of like a welcome addition to social media now.
Yeah, definitely. Well, good. I'm happy to hear your perspective on that. Makes a lot of sense. And I feel like it's this new trend that I've heard amongst some of my journalist friends who are, going there and just listening, finding other resources. And I think people who are looking to build thought leadership thoughtfully, right? Not just on Instagram where you're like, hey, selfie. This is you as a leader, having an opportunity to speak and participate in these really meaningful conversations that happen. And this can also be where you're discovered, where media are looking for what's next and potential resources. So I've been encouraging a lot of the CEOs that I work with and the thought leaders who I already know are brilliant. Get on Clubhouse, just listen. And when you feel comfortable, we'll get you into some of these conversations. But this is where, part of where you need to be. And so good to hear your perspective on that. One other question, right? I know personally, because I'm a night owl, that sometimes, I see Dean is working and he's replying via email. So of course, I'm not going to just encourage everybody to pitch you at 10 o'clock at night. But if you had a preference, days of the week that you would say are, better for you, times of the day. I remember a Facebook post that you put up, I think it was about a year ago or a little bit more, where you had said, for those of you PR people who are pitching me, like, does the news always have to be on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday? Like, I would be open to covering on other days of the week. And I thought that was so interesting because, for a lot of clients, what they usually say, Friday, nobody's online and but people are, especially during a pandemic, we're not going anywhere. We're all here. We're at home, So I would love for you to just share, one, what are the best times a day, even just for you daily? Here's, I love winding down. If I see a pitch at 3, it feels better than the 700 that are coming at me all at once at 9 a.m. Right. So yeah, just love to hear from you on that.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, there's different sort of ways that changes too. Like I think a lot of people figured out that, say, Tuesday at 6 a.m. is like the ideal time to have a story go live, because then people are back into the groove of working after catching up on Monday. They may have more time to read. 6 a.m. is good if you want to catch people on the East Coast of the United States. People on the West Coast will get to it. And people in Europe are also going to be able to read it before they're quitting for the day or knocking off. And so that problem became that every pitch that comes in is for Tuesday at 6 a.m. embargo. And that means on Monday, and usually Monday night, I have to write 10 stories, right, or more. And then by like Thursday, there's a little bit. And Friday and Monday, there's no stories, right? Saturday, Sunday, nobody wants a story to run on those days either. And that there's something wrong with that world where
right. You're like, that makes my Mondays horrible.
Yeah, and you're also competing with so many others. For the best story of the day. Because say again, if I'm getting 500 emails in a day and I'm only able to do at most 10 stories, maybe more like 4 or 5 usually, then your story on a Tuesday has to be the best of 5 out of potentially 2,000 that are coming in. And so then if you just pick a different day of the week and have it run on Friday, there's fewer readers, but there's less competition as well. And so
that's a really good point. Absolutely. That's a great point. Okay. And so, you're also,
by the way, there's another element to that, and that is I can schedule stories to run at different times, right? And it's not that big a deal. So people don't mind doing longer reads on Saturday and Sunday. So like Q&As and things like that will be good to run on those weekend days.
I love it. And would you say that is true for VentureBeat specifically, or would you say for other blogs in general, like things that like that you have seen in the industry, just as a rule of thumb?
Yeah, I think it probably carries over for most online publications. If you have things like newspapers, like they do have different kinds of bureaucratic rules about like when the next day's newspaper stories would appear online. And I think the PR folks have to be careful about that. Like if you have a morning embargo deadline for a typical story, the newspaper will come out in the morning, and so that's fine. But they will also sometimes just release a whole batch of stories earlier than that, and then it can wind up being so early that like it's the previous day, right? And so then it appears to be like, okay, somebody didn't pay attention, and now there's like a 12-15 hour gap between when the first story comes out and when everybody else comes out on the embargo time. So that's something to be careful about. It's good to be careful about publications that say that they don't really honor embargoes, and if you pitch them, they will just run the story anytime they want, right? So
yeah, definitely. That's definitely something that doing your homework, and this is why it's so important for PR people to do that, to know which outlets will do that and which ones won't, so that you're not just blindly like, oh, here's the press release, it's under embargo, and they didn't ask for it, right? And so now it's in their hands, and there is no how do you say it? There's no agreement,
right?
Right. Yeah. So no, I think that's a very, very valid point. And the other thing too, that I know you have to review, and maybe you have a team that does this, but when you're choosing who speakers are for GamesBeat, right? Or who's going to present at the conferences, what is it that you're usually looking for in a lot of those executives that are being pitched?
Yeah. So I'm in the middle of that now. Our next GamesBeat conference is April 28th and 29th, and we have done, like during the pandemic, we've switched from doing, say, one GamesBeat conference a year to more online conferences. And our last conference was January 26th, and now we already have one coming in April online. And so there's more opportunity for people to get speaking at these events. And then, I also do a lot of webinars now as well. And so it's we're able to move faster and do things sort of to accommodate more speakers online now. But you still want to have, start with the highest quality. There's a balance between earned speaking roles and then sponsored speaking roles, and we'll distinguish between those. And but like the weaker pitches that come in and the weaker speakers, we would direct them to sponsorships, and if they're willing to do that, then they have a better chance, right? They still have to come up with a good idea and good reason to show that they have some thought leadership. But we'll seek out most of the sort of the star speakers that we think will help the business of the conference. Like, if you get a star speaker, then more sponsors will be interested in sponsoring and more people will come to see it, right? If you have an ordinary speaker or somebody who nobody knows or has heard about, then they still have a chance, but they're less likely to get picked. And the chance really is like, what do you bring to the table that has never been seen before? And so, is it innovative? Is it something that you do that nobody else does? And are you a compelling and really brilliant speaker? And sometimes that makes a huge difference. Diversity makes a difference too, because we don't want to have a conference that is all just one type of person. We want to have a variety of people. We want to also give room to up and coming people who can show not only diversity, but they have ideas that are different, that the older crowd maybe doesn't embrace yet. And so I think of things like the NFT.
No, I love this. I mean, this is so
pioneers, right? uh, they're going to be younger entrepreneurs, and the established companies might not get into that stuff yet for a long time. So, yeah, anyway.
I love it. No, this is all really good feedback because, again, for those of us who represent clients who don't quite understand what it takes to be a thought leader, to be sought out as a star speaker, it takes work on their end also with, making sure that they have a voice, that they're known, that their profiles, whether it be online or whatever, that those are in really great shape, because if they are relatively unknown, it's like, how are they going to draw more people, more business, like you said? So it's really big for us. We make it a point to let the leaders of certain companies know that, you need to make sure that if we're going to be out pitching you to be a speaker somewhere, that you also look the part. And so we need to help build that up so that it gets, decision makers like you to a yes. Because then it's like, oh yeah, we see everything that we need. Their LinkedIn, wow, all these connections. I see their work history, but they were at all these wonderful places. They're also out writing thought leadership pieces. They've spoken at conferences before. All of those things matter. So I'm glad to hear that from you, and hopefully more people will pay attention and make sure that if their leader that they're pitching isn't quite there, that they help them get there in some way, right? Develop a plan around their thought leadership to help people like you so that you have more of a strong list to choose from.
Yeah, and I mentioned sponsorships, but that's not my department too.
Right,
I
of
should
course.
point out that I am picking the people on the quality of
That's right.
what we have to choose from, if there is interest in sponsoring, I will, send them off to the right department.
Yep,
So,
for sure.
so yeah. And that's important to point out that, when I'm picking speakers, I'm trying to go by like exactly what is best about, what they can do for the audience.
Love it. Love it. So as we're getting closer to, to the end of this, I feel like we could talk for hours about all of these things. I want to make sure that we put this out there, and this is for you, right? What is it that PR people could do today, tomorrow, to make your life easier?
Yeah, I think they are really more like the first line of defense against that avalanche of email. And
Yes.
it's not about a volume game right now. I think quality pitches are the ones that stand out, and if you can filter out what you think are weak pitches, and then send them back until they become quality pitches, then I get a better inbox, right? And then I get more things to choose from that are the highest quality, and that's what it has to be about today, because there's too much information coming at not only me but at everybody else, at the readers, right? And so I do also have to restrain myself and say, okay, I could do 10 stories today, but maybe it's better to do 5 good stories than it is to do 10 bad ones, right? So same goes for everybody else. It's like move the quality up the chain towards also the people you're training, like the executives, I guess.
Yep. I love it. I love it. Well, I hope everyone out there is listening to that. And Dean, before we say our goodbyes, I want to make sure that if there's anything that you are promoting, anything that you want people to know about, where can they find you? If you want to share all of that information with us, that would be awesome.
I am pretty active on Twitter. I can, be contacted out of the blue there as Dean Tak, through tweets or DMs as well. I give out my email to anybody who really needs it, and then I go on to Clubhouse frequently and go into like things like the Game Industry Cocktail Hour, or our join panels there as well. I write for both VentureBeat, tech news stories for VentureBeat. I write for GamesBeat as well, and yeah, I haven't been writing any books lately, but if it's games, always happy to get pitches, and I also don't want to make people afraid to approach me and to pitch me, right? And so part of the, say, drive to appear on things like Clubhouse is to meet people I don't already know. And I believe in this sort of diversity and diversity of sources. The more people you talk to, the less likely you're locked into the wrong point of view, right?
Oh, I love that. I love it. Well, Dean, this has been an awesome discussion, as always. I love chatting with you. And thank you, everyone who has tuned in to listen to another episode of Perfect Pitch. Be sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button down here. For more information on Perfect Pitch or on NRPR Group, please visit our website at nrprgroup.com. Dean, thank you. It's been amazing having you on the show, and I just appreciate your time and all of the great tips that you shared. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome.
It's been great working with you over the years.
Love it.